The trouble began the moment the homeowner moved into his small corner house at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. The neighborhood looked peaceful from the outside, freshly trimmed lawns, quiet sidewalks, and identical homes lined up like obedient soldiers. But beneath that polished surface lived an HOA board that enjoyed controlling every detail of everyone's life. Most people in the community had learned to accept it. Some even feared it. But one person, the new homeowner, wasn't willing to surrender his freedom so easily. At first, everything seemed normal. His lights worked, his appliances ran smoothly, and the electricity bill reflected typical usage. But as days passed, strange flickers began to haunt his home. They were small at first, barely noticeable dips of brightness, like someone dimming the switch for half a second. He assumed it was just old wiring or a loose connection. But the issue grew worse. Entire rooms would briefly lose power, and sometimes the main breaker would snap off at night without explanation. He documented each occurrence. Time stamps. Durations. Locations. Eventually, the pattern became undeniable. The outages always happened when he wasn't home, or late at night when the HOA patrolled the neighborhood. He suspected sabotage, but he knew how this HOA board operated. They always acted like they were protecting property values, masking their control with fake smiles and rules written to benefit only themselves. Still, the homeowner needed proof. He started examining his electrical panel. It was mounted on the outside wall, just like every neighbor's. And that was the first problem. Anyone from the HOA could easily access it without setting foot inside the house. They had keys to every electrical unit for emergency inspections. But he noticed signs that the panel had been opened, dust moved, screws slightly off alignment, and faint fingerprints where none should be. The HOA president, a notoriously intrusive woman known for carrying her rulebook like a badge of power, had already sent him 2 warning letters claiming his excessive evening lights were disturbing the community's peace. He didn't even have outdoor lights. He suspected she wanted an excuse to monitor him, and when she didn't find anything outside, she turned to the one place she could easily interfere, his electricity. The flickers became full blackouts on weekends. He lost food from the freezer. His home security system rebooted constantly. His work computer crashed twice. If he complained, the HOA simply said they had no record of electrical issues on the block and recommended he hire an electrician at his own cost. That response told him everything. They knew exactly what they were doing. So he decided to craft a trap. It had to be clever. Hidden. Something that wouldn't cause harm but would expose the person meddling with his electrical panel. The strategy he designed came from years of engineering experience. He installed a small, motion-activated recording device inside the panel, thin, silent, and hidden beneath wiring. It captured video only when the panel was opened. The device also logged time, temperature, and access duration. He placed a secondary sensor on the panel door itself to notify him instantly if someone tried to open it. But he didn't stop there. He added a harmless visual surprise inside the panel, something guaranteed to make anyone messing with the switches jump back in fear long enough to be recorded clearly. Something simple, safe, but unforgettable, a spring-loaded pop-up cutout shaped like a large, venomous-looking snake. Its only purpose was to shock the intruder and force them to look directly at the camera's lens. Once his trap was complete, he waited. He went about his daily routine, acting unaware, even leaving the house at predictable times so the HOA would feel confident. The first 3 days were quiet. No flickers. No blackouts. That meant one thing: the HOA was watching him closely, waiting for the moment he wasn't home. On the 4th night, just after midnight, his phone buzzed with the alert. Someone had opened the electrical panel. His pulse rose, but he stayed calm. He didn't rush outside. He knew he needed the footage, not confrontation. The device recorded everything automatically. He woke up early the next morning and reviewed the footage. What he saw confirmed every suspicion he had held from the start. The HOA president approached his panel with a flashlight, glanced around to make sure no neighbors were watching, and opened it with a controlling confidence that came from being above consequences. But the second she lifted the panel door fully open, the spring-loaded trap snapped upward. She recoiled with a loud, startled reaction, stumbling back and nearly dropping her flashlight. Then, as she regained composure and leaned in to investigate, her face aligned perfectly with the camera. The footage captured her expression: shock, anger, fear, and guilt all at once. This was the proof he needed. He spent the next hour backing up the files, making multiple copies, and storing them safely. The HOA had crossed a line. Tampering with personal utilities wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. He knew this video could end their harassment and stop their electrical sabotage forever. But he wasn't planning to confront them immediately. No, he wanted to use this evidence strategically. He wanted to expose them at the right time and in the right way, ensuring they couldn't deny or twist the truth. But something unexpected happened by the afternoon. The HOA president sent him another warning letter claiming he had violated community property regulations by using unauthorized electrical consumption. This proved she had visited his panel for a reason, and now she was trying to build a false case to blame him. She had no idea he had the footage. No idea her sneaky midnight operation was recorded. No idea he had trapped her in her own game. He realized this wasn't only about electricity. It was about power, literal and figurative. The HOA president saw his independence as a threat. She wanted full control, and sabotaging his electricity was her way of punishing him for not falling in line. But now, he finally had leverage. And as evening approached, he prepared for the next step, the moment when he would quietly set the stage for the HOA's downfall. The morning after capturing the footage, the homeowner felt the shift in the air around Maple Ridge Lane. It wasn't visible, but it was present, an uneasiness that clung to the sidewalks and drifted through the hedges. The HOA president walked her usual route with noticeably quicker steps, clutching her clipboard tighter, avoiding eye contact with anyone outside. Something in her posture revealed she was not simply patrolling, she was monitoring, watching for consequences she hoped wouldn't come. The homeowner didn't confront her. He didn't even acknowledge the warning letter she had sent in the middle of the night. Instead, he pretended to go about his day as if everything were normal. This was intentional. The more confident the HOA felt in their secrecy, the more mistakes they were likely to make. He took time to analyze the video carefully. Every detail mattered: the flashlight she held, the time she arrived, the direction she came from, even the small tool pouch on her waist suggesting planned tampering rather than casual inspection. This wasn't a one-time mistake, this was a deliberate act carried out with precision. She had done this before and had grown comfortable doing it. By afternoon, he backed up the footage onto separate drives and stored one inside a fireproof safe. Another copy was uploaded to cloud storage. The evidence wasn't going anywhere. Still, he understood something crucial: revealing the footage too early would give the HOA a chance to spin their own story. They were experts at manipulating neighbors by hiding misconduct behind complicated rules. If confronted, they could easily claim he had fabricated the footage or violated HOA guidelines by installing unauthorized recording devices. But if he waited, if he let their behavior escalate, then their denial would crumble under the weight of their own actions. And he didn't have to wait long. That same evening, the HOA sent him a second letter. This one was far more serious. They accused him of tampering with community electrical infrastructure and demanded an immediate inspection of his home, including internal systems. The wording was aggressive, bordering on ridiculous. They wanted access inside his house now, not just the exterior panel. It was clear they were attempting to fabricate a narrative before he could expose theirs. He ignored the letter entirely. The next morning, a notice appeared on his door stating that he was being fined for obstruction of HOA procedures. The board believed they had him trapped, and that assumption made them bold. But boldness is where tyrants often slip the hardest. Meanwhile, the homeowner quietly prepared his next move. He printed still images from the footage, clear shots of the HOA president opening his panel and recoiling at the spring-loaded trap. He placed them in a sealed envelope, along with a brief description of the event. But he didn't deliver the envelope to her. Instead, he mailed it anonymously to the entire HOA board, excluding the president herself. The board consisted of 4 other members, 2 who followed the president blindly, 1 who feared her, and 1 who often questioned her decisions but lacked proof to challenge her authority. That final member was the key. The homeowner suspected he would recognize the seriousness of what he saw. The letters were delivered within 24 hours. He watched from his window as the board members reacted. The treasurer opened his envelope while walking back from the mailbox. His footsteps slowed, his expression changed, and he looked toward the president's house with growing discomfort. The secretary stared at her photos for almost 5 minutes before placing them in her purse and heading inside without speaking to anyone. The one board member who had always appeared skeptical of the president's leadership didn't even wait, he marched directly to her house and demanded a meeting. But the HOA president still had not received anything herself. She remained unaware that her actions had been exposed internally. By late afternoon, tension spread through the neighborhood like a quiet, unseen fire. The president continued walking around with forced confidence, but her peers had begun stepping away from her shadow. Their conversations grew guarded. Their routines became stiff. Something had disrupted the power dynamic, and the homeowner knew this was only the beginning. That night, just after sunset, the lights in his home flickered again. But this time, it wasn't sabotage. It was hesitation. Someone approached the panel, touched it, then stepped away. The motion sensor wasn't triggered because the door wasn't opened. Whoever it was stood uncertain, perhaps shaken by the images they had received. The homeowner watched the shadow move back and forth before finally retreating into the dark. This small moment proved that fear had begun replacing arrogance within the board. By morning, the HOA president finally seemed to realize something was wrong. She knocked on doors, demanded to speak with board members, and insisted someone had sabotaged her authority. But they avoided her, offering excuses, pretending to be busy, or simply refusing to answer. Her isolation became visible. Meanwhile, the homeowner prepared for the final phase of his plan. He scheduled a meeting, not with the HOA, but with the county utilities inspector, providing them with a sanitized version of the footage. He explained the situation professionally, presenting only facts, unauthorized access, tampering, and potential safety violations. The inspector took the matter seriously, especially since tampering with residential electricity could risk outages, fires, and legal liability. The inspector announced he would visit the neighborhood within 48 hours. He also knew the president would panic the moment she learned about it. Late that evening, as he sat on his porch, the HOA president marched toward his house. Her steps were determined but shaky, fueled by desperation rather than authority. She didn't know about the footage, but she sensed the situation slipping beyond her control. She tried to appear composed, but the strain on her face revealed everything: fear, frustration, and a growing suspicion that someone had turned her own tactics against her. She placed an envelope on his door, not daring to knock. Inside was a notice claiming mandatory disciplinary action would be initiated if he did not allow a full inspection of his property within 24 hours. The homeowner simply picked up the envelope, walked inside, and set it on his table. He didn't even open it. At this point, the president's threats no longer mattered. She had already fallen into the trap, just not the one hidden inside the electrical panel. And as the countdown to the county inspection began, the homeowner prepared for the moment everything would collapse around her. The day of the county inspection arrived with an unusual quiet hanging over Maple Ridge Lane. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm, thick, heavy, and filled with tension. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, sensing something unusual was about to unfold. Even those who usually ignored HOA politics felt the shift in the air, like a collective breath being held. The homeowner prepared early. He didn't tidy the electrical panel or try to hide the trap he had used, he simply removed the spring-loaded pop-up and left the recording device in place. The inspector needed to see the truth, but the theatrics weren't necessary anymore. The evidence, the real evidence, had already been captured. Just before noon, a white county utility vehicle rolled into the neighborhood. The inspector stepped out with a clipboard and a calm confidence born from years of handling complaints ranging from minor wiring issues to major violations. He approached the homeowner and introduced himself professionally before requesting access to the electrical panel and any information the homeowner had documented. The homeowner provided everything. Time logs. Photos. A copy of the footage showing the HOA president opening the panel at midnight. The inspector reviewed the material with a deepening seriousness, his brows tightening as each new detail layered onto his understanding. It didn't take long for him to realize the issue was far greater than simple harassment, it was deliberate tampering with active residential electrical infrastructure, a violation the county did not take lightly. Meanwhile, the HOA president paced nervously near her porch, trying to hide her anxiety behind forced composure. When she saw the inspector speaking with the homeowner, her face tightened further. She approached quickly, carrying her rulebook like a shield. She tried to intercept the inspector, but he held up a hand and requested that she wait until he completed his review. That single gesture broken the last piece of ground beneath her. She wasn't in control anymore. The inspector examined the electrical panel, noting scratch marks, disturbed dust patterns, and signs of repeated unauthorized access. He documented everything carefully, taking photos and writing notes with a meticulousness that signaled he intended to follow the matter thoroughly. The homeowner stood back, allowing the inspector to work without interruption. When the inspector finished the initial assessment, he requested a meeting with the entire HOA board. Word spread fast. One by one, the board members emerged from their homes, each wearing their own version of guilt, some quiet, some trembling, some trying to appear neutral. But the president stood rigidly still, jaw clenched, eyes darting between them as if searching for loyalty among faces that no longer supported her. The inspector began calmly, asking if any board member had authorized inspections of private electrical panels. No one spoke. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. The treasurer and secretary avoided the president's gaze. The skeptical board member kept his arms crossed, his expression firm and resolute. The two who had always followed the president's commands now stood frozen between fear and truth. Then the inspector described the evidence: unauthorized entry, nighttime tampering, and recorded footage of someone accessing the homeowner's panel without permission. The moment he said, "recorded footage," the HOA president's composure cracked. Her hand tightened on her clipboard. Her eyes widened briefly before narrowing into an expression of desperate defiance. But her reaction told everyone what the inspector already knew. The guilt was hers. The silence from the board confirmed it. When the inspector revealed he had seen the footage himself, the board members' eyes widened. Their glances shifted toward the president, and in that quiet moment, the power dynamic of the entire HOA shattered. The president tried to interrupt, insisting it must have been a misunderstanding, a safety check, a routine inspection. But the inspector shut her down gently but firmly, reminding her that HOA authority did not extend to private utilities, especially not at midnight, and especially not without homeowner consent. The treasurer finally spoke, his voice quiet, admitting that none of the board had authorized such actions. The secretary followed, confessing she had received the anonymous envelope with the photos and had been shocked by what she saw. Panic began to take over the president as she realized she had been exposed internally long before the inspector arrived. The inspector laid out the consequences plainly. The county would be filing a formal report. The HOA president would be held directly responsible for unauthorized utility tampering. The board would be required to cooperate fully in the investigation. The community could face fines if further violations were discovered. And the county would recommend an immediate suspension of the president's authority pending legal review. The homeowner said nothing throughout the entire process. He didn't have to. The truth did the speaking for him. The president's face drained of color. She tried to accuse the homeowner of setting her up. She tried to claim he had manipulated the panel. She tried every excuse she could reach for. But none of the board members defended her. They had seen the footage. They had seen the panic. They had seen the truth in her reaction. Without support, her authority collapsed. The board voted unanimously, on the spot, to remove her from her position temporarily until the county completed its investigation. The inspector recommended it formally. That vote stripped her of her power, her influence, and the control she had exercised over the neighborhood for years. Word spread quickly. Neighbors began stepping outside, exchanging whispers filled with relief. Some had been victims of her micromanagement for years, but had never dared speak out. Now, seeing her defeated, they realized she was not untouchable. Over the next week, the county investigation proceeded. The inspector returned for follow-up checks, and the board cooperated fully. The president remained inside her home, blinds closed, no longer patrolling, no longer issuing threats or letters. She had gone silent, buried beneath the consequences of her own actions. The homeowner's electricity remained stable, perfectly consistent, without a single flicker. His security systems ran smoothly again. For the first time since moving to Maple Ridge Lane, his home felt like his own. 3 weeks later, the county issued its final ruling. The HOA president was found responsible for multiple violations, including unauthorized access to private utilities. The board removed her permanently. Fines were issued. Regulations were rewritten. And a new policy was established requiring transparent oversight of all HOA activities. Neighbors thanked the homeowner quietly at first, then more openly as they realized how deeply the HOA's behavior had been influencing the community. He had exposed a pattern of control no one else had been able to stop. And while he didn't seek praise or attention, he knew one thing for certain. The trap he installed inside that electrical panel had done more than catch a saboteur. It had broken a cycle of abuse and restored balance to a community that had been controlled by fear for far too long. With the former president gone, the neighborhood finally breathed again. Peace returned to Maple Ridge Lane, not because of rules, or power, or authority, but because someone had decided enough was enough and refused to let the HOA cross one line too many.